don't like to copy others. It's not something easy for me to copy others. I need to feel it like it's something that I can do.
Today's guest, and I say this far too often, is somebody that I've been meaning to have on the podcast for a long time. In this case, 13 years. I actually featured some of her music 13 years ago and mispronounced her name, which I'm notorious for doing. But finally, sat down and chatted with her for the podcast, and I could talk with her for hours about all these topics. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking today with Lila Horovitz. What a fascinating artist. What a multi-dimensional career she's had over the years. I remember listening to her album almost a decade ago. I think it came out in 2011, seeing her videos, including this super cool video called Alone, All One. And I'm going to link up to that. And you're going to hear an excerpt from that and a little bit of her album too, by the way. Here, she's from Argentina. She lives in Madrid. She's doing amazing videos about tango techniques in both Spanish and English, which is very cool. She was playing with Cirque du Soleil, helping to create one of their shows. We talk about all that and much more. And I try to never just jump in with first names and start talking about people. We have so many friends in common, Lila and I, that I just start talking about all these different people. So I'll just identify them here at the outset. We're talking about Andres Martin from Argentina as well. Had him on the podcast several times. Wonderful composer and performer. Diego Zyex, also, again, had him on the podcast twice now, actually, or maybe, three times, actually, he's been on the podcast, and he's doing great work out there, and so check him out in the archives. And also, Christian Esquivel, another Argentinian bassist. Diego's from Montevideo, by the way, but close. And Christian is doing all sorts of cool stuff in Argentina, tango bassist, and I've worked with him at Andres Martin's festival in Tijuana. So we talk about all of them. That's who we're talking about there. Sorry, this intro is getting long, so I'll get into the episode. Quick shout out to our sponsors, D'Addario Strings, Upton Bass, Steve Swan String Bass, The Bass Violin Shop, Modacity, A440 Violin Shop, and Colstein Music. More on them later, but I know you're going to dig this long overdue conversation with the outstanding Lila Horovitz. How are you?
Very well. Where are you?
I'm in San Francisco.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
San Francisco.
Yeah. I forgot. I think I knew that you were in Spain, and I was just thinking Argentina when we were talking, and so I was, but hi to you from Diego and Andres, and I know that we know a lot of people in common.
Yeah. I had our first double bass quartet with Andres, me, Christian, and Miguel, and it was in 1998 or 99.
Wow. Well, I've gotten to know Christian too. I've gotten to know because of Andres' festival in Tijuana. So he had Christian. Exactly. So it's funny because we were chatting and they were talking about this bassist named Lila, and then it rang a bell, and I remember I'm thinking back 10, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, something, putting some of your music out of my podcast, right when I started. And so it's so cool. And then you've just recently started to do these YouTube videos, which is super cool. And I actually just played my very first tango gig, a couple months ago. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic, because I don't know what I'm doing. I have no...
Yes. What tango did you play?
Oh, I played... So there's a bassist here in San Francisco named Richard Duke that has a tango band, bandoneon, the typical. And so he had me sub in for a performance, and so I learned. I've got them all here on my iPad, but I learned like 20 tunes and got together and learned a few of the strappata and the different techniques. But I still don't know what I'm doing, and so it was. I love that you're putting that on YouTube. That's really cool.
Great. Yes, I would love that. Many bassists play tango, and they want to learn, or they want to use it in the repertoires. I love to.
Well, the subtleties, there's so much subtlety to the art form. And I remember Christian doing some, my Spanish is terrible, but I can pick up a little bit, and so I was watching him do a class and just showing all these different techniques and it's, there's so much to, it's like classical symphonic bass playing in so many ways, but it's a totally different set of techniques. But you've got all these if you're playing Mozart or Beethoven or Brahms, you have all these different strokes you would do, and I see a lot of similarities to tango playing.
Yes, I think it is for double bass, the tango is one of the music that most development has for the instrument, because they use very, very well all the details of the sound, a lot of bow. You know that there are few popular music that use the double bass with bow. Most popular music are pizzi. So I think tango is very different because of that, and we use a lot of bow, and I think it's very interesting for basses because of that, because you can use both techniques, pizzi and bow, but very profound. You can go very profound with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because you also, because there's not a percussionist, you also are the rhythm section in so many ways.
Yes, as I said in the YouTube video, that tango, another different thing from the popular music is that they don't use percussion. At the beginning, the tango music is a very popular and dancing music, but without percussion. So the double bass is that role.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I'm always interested because I play French bow. I always associate the tango playing in French bow. Does anybody play German bow tango? Is that a thing?
No, because in Argentina, the French bow is the technique that went more. All the bassists took the French bow, but I had students in Germany with German bow, or Liechtenstein or Austria, or those countries that they are more used to use the German bow, and they can play. I don't play the German bow, but I try to tell them how to play it, how I played in the French, and they translate it to the German. I know some of them that also then they try to change to French bow, because they say it's more organic. For all the strokes we use in tango, is more organic, the French bow. But it's possible to do it with the German too.
Yeah, it makes sense because it developed with all these, with that bow and all these like sort of special, like I've seen people do some tango like things with German bow, but yeah, my German bow technique is so poor that I don't understand, but yeah, the bounciness, it just handles a little differently.
Bouncing, yes, all the short, the very staccato short and bouncing things are more French. Yes. Mm-hmm. French like.
So, are you playing Cirque du Soleil, or were you playing Cirque du Soleil?
I was playing all last year, last year, 2019. I was playing in Canada, and I was creating the new show. I was in the creating process, which was very interesting to be with all those artists.
Wow. Yeah, I was looking on Facebook and seeing some clips of you playing, and like you were playing like a carbon fiber bass too, I think, upright bass, and then wow.
I love it. The carbon bass, it's great. It's super stable with very good sound, super easy to play. I loved it. I never have been playing a carbon bass, and it was great.
Well, so I've a friend of mine, a bass player here in the States, Derek Jones. He plays Cirque du Soleil's show Ka in Las Vegas. He was he that started, I think, maybe 14 years ago, and he's been the bassist ever since. And so I've gotten a chance to see Ka from the musician studio a couple times, and also see it from the audience. And I mean, just like the scope of those shows is unbelievable. You know, and Derek, he had a hand in creating the music for it, and he's playing electric bass, he's playing upright bass, he has his makeup and his mohawk because he goes out on stage at the end and plays. How that's so cool that you've been involved in actually creating some Cirque shows. How did you get connected with Cirque du Soleil? How did that happen?
I did it in the regular way, which is you apply by an internet form for them to casting. For Cirque casting, that's cirquedusoleil.com, and they called me, and I went to make an audition to Paris because they had auditions, personal auditions with presence auditions, and I did it in Paris. Yes, was great, and I played the pieces they asked me to play, and then they said, well, play something free from you, and I played a version I have of El Día que Me Quieras, the Carlos Gardel's tango, where I play and sing and dance all together. And they say that's very circus thing, never seen before. They told me that never seen before. I said, never seen before. These people is saying that. Well, was what I did.
Well, I'm sure they loved you. That was like exactly what I remember talking to Derek about the audition, and he was playing in a bunch of different groups in I think he was based in Nashville at the time, and they were having auditions, and so he went in and he said that he played the bass and did some improv and that sort of thing, and then they said, okay, put the bass away now. Would they put on some like tribal music, and they said dance, and he'd never danced, you know, and so he just went for it, and it sounded like a fascinating audition process, but it worked out. So wow. Yeah. What? Yes. So was the show Algeria that you were playing? What were you?
Alegría.
Okay. Alegría. Okay. So what's that? And I'll link to, you know, everything you got up online, but like what was that? What was that show like? So you're playing electric, you were playing upright. Just what was that experience like playing that?
Was great because I was never get bored because I have to change each song with a different instrument, changing all the time, and the half of the show was behind a curtain, but in the second part the curtain fall down, and we went on stage and we did a thing with the clowns, and we did a things with the clowns playing for the clown thing. Was very fun, and there had another part where the girls of the band went out playing a thing very, very powerful that was called Power Track, and the artists were jumping in the air. It was very powerful. It was a great experience.
Wow. What a cool experience. And yeah, I can see you auditioning for that, and that just being like going over very well. And then you were performing. Were you in Canada, or where were you actually doing the show? Were you touring with the show, or
they were touring, but in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. The beginning.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Had you spent much time in Canada before, or was that?
It was my first time in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah, I loved it too. It was a great experience to know that. Yeah.
It's a great country. Were you there in the winter?
Yes, I had a very long winter. That is the worst part. I think it's not the best. And and Montreal is all many months all white. You say all white, and when all the snow goes, you say where were we? Because everything changes without the snow. because with the snow, you don't understand where you are. Is everything the same, But
Yeah.
no, right.
Yeah, that's the downside of Canada for sure, is the weather. But we like to say that it keeps out the weak. Like if you can't take it, you come to here to California or somewhere.
Yeah.
So I have only been to Madrid once. I've been to Spain a couple of times, but I've only been to Madrid once, and I was conducting a youth orchestra, so I didn't get I had 70 children with me, so I didn't get a chance to really explore. But what's it like being a musician in Madrid? It's one of my favorite cities that I've ever spent time in. It seems like such a fascinating place. What is there a lot of what's the musical world like there?
Yes, well, in one part, there is large Argentine community or South American people community. So we have a lot of people to play. For example, we are going to play in 2 weeks with a trio with Argentinian music, folk and tango music, which I love and was what I studied when I was in the school. And I love that music, and here there are some public for that music. And then you have flamenco, which I play too with many flamenco musicians, and that is another world, completely other planet, because the people is from other planet and all is from other planet. And then you have a lot of musicians, jazz musicians, classical musicians. Now there are many musicians, many schools, and the people is always doing new projects and exchanging ideas, and it is really interesting. The public is another world, because the public, the Spanish people, they like to be outside and drinking beer, and sometimes to put them into a theater or a concert hall is more difficult. We have fun, but the public, sometimes you have to be very, very careful because with that. And I played a lot in theater, because I have here my own theater company. I don't know if you know about that, which is called Funambiolistas. And it's music and theater and body and all on stage, and without words, but telling a story with the instrument or with the body and with the gestural things. That was a great experience, because here there wasn't things like that, where the musicians go on stage telling a story, being actresses on stage, singing and all that for all publics. And that was a great experience. And I have been turning for all Spain, because Spain has many theaters, all inside, a lot of theaters. All the little towns, they have our own big theater. And that is a great experience too.
Wow. When did you start this theater company? That sounds completely cool.
That was in 2013.
Okay.
We have been on tour from that time, 6 years more or less. We had 2, then 3 shows. We had a lot of prizes too, because it was something very original, and they were very surprised about what we were doing, because we try to go out from the instrument. And for the double bass, I always it's very easy, because you treat the double bass as another person almost. It's a very big instrument that makes a lot of games to play. Give very, very, you can play a lot in that way. And I had, for example, a number where I used to dance tango, but with the double bass, dancing tango with the double bass, and some others in where we used to move and use the instrument as another person. And the girls that playing violin, they used to take the instrument out of the shoulder and use it in many other ways, allowing to do different movements, very completely different at the movement that a violinist can do.
One of the great bass players of all time, Fred Zimmerman, former principal bass at the New York Philharmonic. He was Barry Colstein of Colstein Music. He was Barry's bass teacher. Here's Barry on Fred Zimmerman.
Anybody that knew Fred would say he was one of a kind. I mean, the man was probably the most talented, the most giving. He was the most interesting. Not only was he an amazing teacher, I mean, an amazing performer, he was an amazing artist also. He was truly a great artist.
Along with Fred Zimmerman, people like Milt Hinton, Homer Mensch, Orrin O'Brien, and so many others have had their basses worked on at Colstein's or had instruments made for them by Colstein's. Thank you, Barry, for everything that you've done for the bass world. And folks, check them out at Colstein.com. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. Every violin shop has its own unique origin story. And here's A440's Michael Spadero on how the shop got started.
My mother-in-law started this business in 1982, and she was a professional cellist. But the story she told me was that Camille, my sister-in-law, is violinist with the LA Phil. Mm-hmm. And when she was maybe in high school, her violin was being repaired in a shop. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, the shop owner had some legal problem where, like, the Cook County Sheriff or someone confiscated all the stuff.
Okay.
So the only way for my mother-in-law to get her daughter's violin back was to buy all the contents of the shop at a police auction.
Okay. Wow.
So since she had all these instruments, I think that's what initially made her start a shop.
It's a great shop. I've gone there for years, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Michael. And folks, check them out at a440violinshop.com. Wow. I want to come to Spain and see one of these shows. That sounds amazing.
You can see, then I send you some YouTube videos too.
Please, and I'll link up to those too. And it's great. What a cool. So I want to know all about that. But what a cool way to see the country too. So you've toured all over Spain.
Yes.
I've been to A Coruña, where Diego is, and Simon Garcia, but then also Madrid, Toledo, Seville, Granada, and driving around the. And I mean, like, what a varied country! So many different, and it's so mountainous, and the olive trees everywhere, and I mean, and getting a chance to go into these small towns. What a fascinating way to explore that country.
Yeah, that was a really, I think is what I love the most. Going the routine was like this: going to a town by train, for example, the double bass, and I felt very grateful because as we are a theater company, we had scenography, and the scenography went in another. In a track with the instruments, so I never had to take my bass, the bass to the gig, because they go in the track with the scenography. So the best routine for me is going by train with my little suitcase, go have lunch in a new town. Where you arrive and you see the town and you say, well, let's go to eat that place, and you always eat very well in this country. So you have your lunch, and then if you have time, you have a little nap in the hotel, and then you go to the theater to make all the lighting and all, because it's theater. We have to go there 3 hours before or 4 hours before the show to put the lights and the scenography, and to see that everything is the way, and looking at the ways to go out and go into the stage, because we have a lot of movement like theater. So you have to see if you have your step, or because then everything is without light. So you have to be, how to say, familiarized with the space, So we have to go 4 hours before the show. And then doing the show, and then we used to say goodbye to the public outside when the public goes out, so you can have feedback with the people. Wow. have a beer, because all we want after the show is have a beer.
What a great routine, and not having to take your own bass, being able to put the bass in the truck and say bye bass, and just have your little. That's a very civilized way to to explore.
Yeah.
So when did you move to Spain? When did that happen?
2001.
Okay.
I went 1 year before to Sweden. I went out from Argentina in 2000, and then I was to Stockholm, and I was there 1 year, and then I came to Spain.
Wow, what was Stockholm like? That must have been a fun year, probably a cold year coming from Argentina, but
yeah, very cold too, as Canada, the same. A lot of snow, but then there we met a bandoneonist, a Swedish guy who played bandoneon, super good. He's a fan of Piazzolla and tango music, so I used to have a group with him, and we used to play quite a lot in Sweden, in Stockholm. And then I came to Spain. Here I stayed. I had 2 kids, so both are Spanish.
I can understand moving to Spain and never leaving. It's just one of my favorite places to be. It's such a great civilized is just one of the words that comes up to me. You know, when I was in A Coruña walking around, I went in and got a beer. It was maybe like 11:30 in the morning or something, and I just wanted a beer. I love the Spanish, but then they brought me a ham sandwich and a salad, and it's like
it's at the beginning you have to be very careful, because if you come here and you start in that life, you don't study, you don't work, and it's very easy to lose your mind. So you have to be at the beginning very disciplined.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, and then it's just a fascinating culture to me with the nightlife, right? I mean, like 10 p.m. dinner is getting going, right? You and it's it's got to be tricky to. I mean, I know that people find ways to work. It's just a different lifestyle, but it seems like I could definitely see myself like just disappearing into leisure and never getting anything accomplished. So
yeah. Yeah, that's the tricky part.
So you must have the most fascinating background, like doing what you're doing. So did you grow up in Buenos Aires? Is that okay? Okay, so tell me about were your parents musical? Was your family? I know you've got artists in the family, but just like tell me about how you grew up.
Sister. Yeah. My mother played piano, and she still plays piano. She has students at home, and she plays the guitar too. She plays instruments, wind instruments from the Los Andes, Andinos, from Argentina. But she was not professional, but she always played. And my father was a photographer. He was a photographer of football a lot, and from arts too. So he toured a lot too. He traveled very much, and he always brought CDs or music from everywhere. And he loved classical music very much, and folklore music from Argentina too. So yes, I had a very musical house. They were not musicians, but they very, very liked music. We used to go to study music or some other arts. I used to study a kind of different art when I was young: theater, literature, dance, all that. They brought us very close to all the performing arts. And then my sister is singer too. My brother is an architect. And we used to play together with my sister too. Every time she comes to Spain, we play together. If I go to Argentina, we play together too. And then I study in a conservatory, but of popular music, tango and folklore music. And I developed the classical technique with professor in private classes. because I started by the popular music, and I always did popular music. Then I loved, because I started with the electric bass. I started at 12 with the electric bass. And when I went to this school, and for the first time, I listened a tango orchestra all together in a room playing that music that I had already listened that, but I have never been in a tango orchestra with all the musicians and 4 bandoneons, for example, 4 bandoneons and strings and piano. I went crazy in that moment, and I said, I want to play this music, because that music, I felt it like something very, very mine, from my identity, and something that I could do it from myself, because I have been playing jazz with the electric bass. My teacher was very jazz fan, and I played jazz, and I said always, I was Jaco Pastorius fan, of course, but I said I never will play like these people, because they grown up in the United States, they have another background, and my way of playing is not this. I never felt it like something mine, and I don't like to copy others. It's not something easy for me to copy others. I need to feel it like it's something that I can do. So I had a kind of crisis, musical crisis, when I was 15, because I realized of that, and I said, which is the music I could make mine? And then I went to this school, and for the first time I listened to tango orchestra, and I said, this is it. This is it. This is something that I feel like mine, and I can do it from myself in my way. I can feel like with some kind of authority later to change it or to do it all in my free version, because I feel it like something very, really close to me.
Wow, fascinating. Here in the United States, jazz wasn't taught in conservatory or in music schools for a long time. You could only study classical, and then at a certain point, it started to get adopted. And now here, everywhere has a jazz program. Was it similar in Argentina? When did people start to? Because it's really cool that you got a degree in that and popular music. Had that been around for a while, or was that kind of a new thing?
This was the first school. And it's a public school. It has a degree like the conservatories, and it was the first one. And I'm telling about the 80s, and I was studying in 90s, but I think it was from 70s, 80s. It was very close to the time I went to study. And yes, all the people studied classical music in conservatories and popular music. You learn it by the gigs, in that.
Yeah, what a forward-thinking school. It's really interesting. Here in the States, I think the biggest school that focuses on popular music would be Berkeley in Boston. And it's amazing. That's actually the largest bass program in the United States. I think that they have like over 500 bass students and 35 faculty or something like that. And it's really interesting because I come from a classical background, music, very, Bach and Beethoven and Bottesini and all that. And it's really interesting what people cover and what they focus on and just how those schools are structured. Do you remember? And I'm sure things have changed since the 80s. But do you remember like what was taught in that school? What did you cover? Did you have just what were the classes like?
Yes, you had your instrument class, but you had to start with a good technique already course. So it's not a technique school. You have to go there with dominating your instrument, because they are going to teach you the genre. You say?
Yeah, the genre. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Things. So you have to have your technique already done, and then you have some subjects by history of the music of the tango, but was very fun because the history of the tango was taught by an old guy who was a great guitarist, but one of the greatest guitarists, But in the classes, he started to tell stories of when he was young, or the great tango musicians he played with, and he tried to do the story or the history of the tango. But all the people say, Maestro, why don't you tell us something about Troilo, or why something about Piazzolla, And he started to tell, because he met all that guys. And the good part of the school was that all the teachers were very ongoing musicians. They were playing at that time, because they never learned that in any school. They were like popular musicians popular musicians, and they started to learn to teach in that school. So they were like kind of living legends. All the teachers were kind of living legends for us.
Are you ever curious just what kind of production capacity a company like Upton Bass has? Here's Gary and Eric from Upton Bass on how many basses they're turning out every year.
How many instruments today in America, Togwonk, Business Park, Mystic here, entirely in the U.S., do we approximately?
Just completely ourselves?
Yes.
I think probably up over 1,600 now.
Yeah.
Okay,
coming up around 1,700.
Okay.
Yeah.
The evolution of the product line over these almost 1,700 basses at this point is so cool. From the Gary Carr model to the Bohemian and Bostonian and all the other things that they do at Upton. I just really enjoy their instruments, and I have for years and years. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Upton, and check them out online at uptonbass.com. This episode is brought to you by Steve Swan String Bass, and I've always been impressed by how Steve manages to get basses sounding so vibrant, whether it's a student-level bass or a top-of-the-line professional bass. Here's Steve on some of what he has learned in terms of setup.
When steel strings came into general use around 1959, the German bass makers flipped out. And they really got scared that they're going to get big shiploads of basses back that got wrecked by these high-tension steel strings. And so they did three things that really changed the function of the instrument. They shortened the string length, and they lowered the neck angle so the bridges weren't that tall anymore. And then they made the tops a lot thicker. They really wanted to ensure that these basses were not going to come back across the ocean for work anymore. And so the basses tend to sound kind of nasal, and they didn't have any depth. They didn't have a chest voice at all, And so what we do with increasing the neck angle, and we can also increase the overstands for modern playing, can get up into thumb position a lot easier. So a neck reset can accomplish that. Sometimes we'll transplant a neck or make a new neck for these basses that might have a string length that are not friendly to modern playing.
Learn more about what Steve can do to get your bass playing better, and check out his great selection of basses at steveswanstringbass.com. And thanks for sponsoring the podcast, Steve.
Hi, my name is Andres Martin. I'm an Argentinian composer and double bass player living in Tijuana, Mexico. I play in a professional orchestra, also teaching and performing as a soloist in festivals around the world. After trying almost every string set in the market for the last 20 years, I found Kaplan string to be the only ones that can allow me to use all the different colors and techniques I've been working at during my entire career. I use both solo and orchestral sets, and I love the tone, tension, thickness, and the wide range of dynamics and harmonic resonance and timbre I can get with them. For me, they have the perfect balance between thickness and flexibility, making them a true pleasure under my fingers and bow. I'm happy that finally I have a set that makes me happy when I have to play in any situation.
Wow, that's the best kind of teacher. It's like having Leonard Bernstein or somebody be your teacher, and having that connection.
Yeah.
And I know it's a huge topic, but just you don't have to cover the entire history of tango, but maybe somebody who's listening, we got people that come from all different areas. If someone doesn't know much about tango, how did tango evolve in Argentina?
Yes, tango started at the age of 1880s.
Yeah.
And because of the immigration, the immigrants, they came first with a guitar, violin, flute, and they started to play, and they say that the tango comes from the black music too, because of all the slaves that were they came by ship from Buenos Aires to Peru, and they cross all the country, and the word tango comes from that. That was the history, the history that I learned in the school. That guy was telling us that the word tango comes from the reunions, the meetings of the black people was called tambos, and in that tambo they played their music, but they started to play the tango, and they call the word of the music is taken by the meetings of the slaves, and the rhythm or the first cell comes from the habanera. Tom taram pom pom param pom pom param pom pom. That was faster and went to the tango. So it comes from many musics that went to Cuba, went back to South America, come from Europe. It's very mixed. It's a very mixed music, and in the next immigrations waves that we had quite a lot before, after the First World, after the Second, all that immigration waves, more musicians were coming from Europe trying new things. And the bandoneon is a German instrument. It's a German instrument that comes from the procession. It was a kind of organ they used walking in the procession. So it's very weird that in some ship they came with the bandoneon and and they liked it and start to play with that. My theory is that it is very particular theory, but I think it's quite well. All the bandoneon, it says that could be like this. The first tango music was fast, very, very fast. And because for the flute and the violin, very similar to the choro, the Brazilian choro. You know, that is a fast, very like this, very agile. And then came the bandoneon, and the bandoneon is a very difficult instrument to play. They have the four different keyboards. They have to learn by memory 4 different keyboards, because the right hand opening, the right hand closing, and with the left, and the 4 are different. So it's a very instrument of the hell. And imagine that with all that music they cannot play, so they started to go slower and slower for the bandoneonists to can play. And also the phrasing, because the phrasing is da 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 da, instead of da 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 da. So I think it's because they were looking for the keys to play, you know, and they had to wait. Da 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 da, you know. It's my personal theory, but I think it's like that, because I have seen many bandoneonist players, and I think at the beginning it should be like this.
I think you're right, because I was watching too, that when I was playing that gig this fall. I mean, it's so complex. It's like, I mean, just like, I can't even believe what I'm watching. And it's like if you had like a fiddle band or something, and you threw a bassoon player in there, and they were trying to like figure out the things, you know, certain instruments. That makes total sense. I think you're dead on with that. That's hilarious, but that makes sense to me. And then like this, and I love, please keep doing these YouTube videos. It's really cool. And I can kind of follow along with the ones in Spanish. I obviously love the ones in English, because they're very, maybe could you, and again, if someone's not that familiar with tango, the bass player, but they aren't that familiar, what are some of those techniques that you talk about in those videos, or what are some of those specific bass player techniques that tango bassists do?
Yes, these techniques is they come from this. When the double bass started that it was a late instrument too, as the bandoneon. When the bandoneon came the piano and then the double bass. And the double bass used to double the left hand of the piano. In the tango structures, the bass plays exactly the left hand of the piano. And that is a kind of texture that makes the bass part of the music with a lot of profundity and it's very rich. The color of the left hand of the piano with the double bass in an octave, in a lower octave. So that is very characteristic of the tango. So many things like we call arrastres, which is ra, ra, or tampararara, or ra, that you can play in different ways with one bow, different bows, with a slide, or with a
like the pressure on the hand, right? Is that like lighter and then you put down, kind of? Is that
yeah? All that things are kind of to tell the pianist or to tell the others that we are going. So 1, 2, 3, the run, and gives a kind of the rhythmical part. And there are many things that come from that, from how to push the orchestra or the group, how to push it, and you push it from that techniques things. You push it and you take it. No, the bass is like the shipper of the ships.
Right.
The shipman.
Shepherd.
But you have to take the other instruments. So many things from the technique come from there. From you have to do things in anticipating the first beat, and others that come from the swing that we need to do it, that sometimes is with an accent in the fourth beat, and that are so rhythmical, and we don't have percussion, so we have to do it with the touching, the play, and the playing in the and are things that were developed by trying to make them be heard, because maybe at the beginning there was not amplification. The musicians played without microphones or anything, so they have to be heard, to be listened to, for the musicians to be able to take them. So many things are like attention calls, I think. all the technique come from attention calls that listen to the bass, because if you don't listen to the bass, we don't go together. And to the bass to be listened, you have to invent different sounds to get a little off the left hand of the piano, because as we were together, we need to get off. And in that way of trying to get off, they invented different ways of sounding.
Isn't that interesting how something that you think of as just part of the musical language is for a practical reason, like, hey, pay attention over here?
Completely. Because it's a living music. It's a music that come not from the written music. It's not, at the beginning was not written. So it never comes from a school of how the tango should sound, or like classical music. It's completely live thing.
Yeah.
Practical. Yeah. Yes, it's like that.
And that anticipation kind of thing is so interesting to me, like that, it's funny, just like as a string player, especially if you're thinking of, like, let's think of Mozart or something, where you just go like, da, it'd be like right on the beat, right? It's really interesting how it's like in the middle of the bow, not the middle of the bow, it's still near the frog, but it's like after the bow has begun. So you've got this sort of like energy you're putting into the string. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and that's why what I tell about lighting a match, mm-hmm. the way of rap, you have to pull it out, because of that, because you come with an anticipation, but you have to be very very straight and with a very sharp attack in the first. So if you are anticipating, if you don't do that, you sound blah, 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 and you don't have pushing, and you have to push. And it's cool because when some other double bass come from classical music, they go all the time behind. And in tango, you have to go forward. The bass needs to go all the time forward, pushing. So that kind of things of the technique, they are to be a little forward.
Yeah, I love that. I love that analogy of the lighting the match. You mentioned that in one of your videos. That's a great way to think of it. Because there's no swing to the music if you just sort of don't get that push, and that anticipation is really interesting too. And I think that's something that maybe jazz players would have in common, in a lot of settings, especially more. But yeah, that I think we. Bass players who don't play tango maybe or other styles like that, we definitely have a tendency to kind of wait for the beat and hear.
Yeah, you are waiting for the others, but that's why the tango is so exciting for double basses, because you feel like you are conducting all the time. When you are playing, you are conducting the others. They have to go, you have to take them and they follow you. That's why for the bass, for me, is the best music to play because of that, because you are conducting. They need to go with the bass all the time. Listen to the bass, after the bass, and we are anticipating and doing things, changing the something that I'm going to do in my videos, because I just made one about the rhythmical patterns. The rhythmic patterns, and one is the marcato, chon, chon, chin, that you can play. You play quarter notes like a walking, and you can do it in different ways as the walking. You can do it more like arpeggio, more like a stride in a chord, or you can do more walking with seconds. And all that different notes. But then you have another rhythmical, like the one is called chan, chum, tum, chum.
Yeah.
Chan, chum, tum, chan. Syncopa. We call syncopa a syncopation,
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. There are many kinds of them, and some of them are called syncopation, but are not syncopated. Yeah. But because it comes from a syncopation, but then maybe you can do it in the right time, in the first. But you do and that anticipation and that slide, the bass with the piano, we are like moving the tempo. We are moving. You can do it, and different orchestras or different musicians, they play the syncopa in a different way, more straight, or the last are a little slower, and there are kind of the difference of the sound of the music, the musicians of the orchestra is how they play the syncopation.
Interesting. Well, I can't wait to check out that video. And I'm so glad that you're putting this out there like that. I know that I'm gonna be watching for my next tango gig to get my syncopations and all my techniques better. And I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but I want to be respectful of your time. But like maybe so somebody who's interested in tango and wants to learn more, they should obviously check out what you're doing and your YouTube channel and check out your recordings and other projects. But like, who else, if you were going to recommend that someone check out either a tango musician from history or a famous tango bassist, like what might be a couple of recordings or artists that you think people should check out?
Yes, I think you should listen to Piazzolla, for example. Piazzolla had one of the best bassist players who was Quicho Díaz. Quicho was his name, Diaz, and he wrote for him Quicho, the piece that many double bass player plays, which is called Quicho in honor to him, and he was the bass player of Troilo, Aníbal Troilo, who was the leader of one of the best tango orchestras, Aníbal Troilo. And in his orchestras, I'm telling you about the 1940s, 1950s, and in that orchestra, Quicho Díaz played, and then Piazzolla took him out and took him to his own group. But Quicho Díaz, he had a kind of sound so big sound, so perfect. And Piazzolla said that he was his best musician. Piazzolla changed all the other musicians in all his history. He was changing the guitar or the violin, but the bass, he kept Quicho Díaz until he died. And that is one. But for example, he wrote Quicho for him, but he never could record it, because Quicho is a piece that is quite difficult for a bass who always played only the bass. It's a very soloist piece. And Quicho was not a soloist. He was the greatest bass of bass, So he never could, because the leading part of the adagio, he always was a kind of not on tune, and Piazzolla never kept that recording to publish it. But he was one of the best players. Then now there are a lot. If you listen to Pablo Aslan or Juan Pablo Navarro or Andrés or Diego Sequeries, all these bass players had a very great technique, and they played the tango with all these shades, we say, to all that little things of the technique.
It's exciting. What a cool music. What a cool art form, and what a great style of music as a bass player to explore. It's just such a
I tell all the bass players to explore it, because it's a music that is very pleasureful for us to play, because of that. Because what I tell you, that you think you are conducting is a very important instrument in tango. One of the most important instruments in a group is the double bass, and I would love to go to those 500 bass players in Berkeley I'll make a workshop for them to play tango. I love to learn, to teach, and make them discover this music and the musicians and all the parts of the tango playing. And so I would love to show all these things. I will go on doing my YouTube videos, which at the beginning I was very nervous doing them, but now I'm a little more comfortable.
Oh, well, they're great. I'm so glad that you're doing them, and yeah, let's make it happen to get you out here to Berkeley or here in California, and it'd be great to see you out here. And I hope to get to Spain again sometime soon, not with 70 children, so I can explore a little.
I have been twice in San Francisco playing tango with a group I had at the beginning, which called Tangata Rea, and we played in many milongas there in San Francisco, where the people go to dance, and we play a lot there in the Bay Area. All the milongas there. We met a lot of American people dancing tango, loving tango. Well, I hope more bass players do that.
Lila, oh my goodness, so great to chat with you. We have to do it again soon. Maybe we can do it in person. I love doing these in person, but any chance to connect with you again would be great. We've got links to everything we talked about that I could remember. I'm not always that great about linking up to everything, but I tried my best on this one. So definitely check her out on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Follow along with these videos that we were talking about. Check out her album, some of these super cool videos, especially this Alone, All One. What a cool concept. I think that was from 2012. Loved it. And thank you for listening. I've been, like I said in this chat, I played my first tango gig recently and I enjoyed it, but don't really know what I'm doing. And I've learned a lot just with what I've watched so far from Lila. And I know I'm going to learn more. And I'm really excited to see what she puts out next. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. If you're a longtime listener, thank you for doing that. If you want to find out more about these episodes or get informed, we've got an email list. We're on whatever social media channel you're hanging out on. So just go to our website, contrabassconversations.com, for all that good stuff. And if you want to reach out, feedback at Contrabass Conversations. We'll put you in touch with me. I love hearing from people and where they're from, where they listen to the podcast, what they want to hear more of, all that kind of good stuff. That is great. Contrabass Conversations is produced by Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, Trevor Jones, and Krista Copper. If you're looking for a great new podcast, The Backstage Creative, and this chronicles the behind the scenes activities of all those people that you aren't necessarily seeing on first billing for a show. So the pit musicians, the costume designers, all that kind of stuff. Great idea for a podcast, and Krista does a wonderful job with that. And if you are looking for a double bass, Mitch Mooring makes a beautiful instrument. Definitely check out what he's doing on his website, mitchmooring.com. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.